your host, Stacey J. Dempsey. And like always, thankfully, I have the one and only dad and one of the other daughters. Good morning and good afternoon to the both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be listening in from.
Wherever you may be listening from, we are so glad that you decided to tune in with us. So, thank you to all of our viewers and our listeners. And here we go. We are excited today to share with you some questions that have been sent in to us over the last few months. We've been gathering up comments and questions that our wonderful viewers and listeners have been sending in to us. So we thought it would be interesting and fun to share with you what those questions are and get some answers from the one and only dad and one of the other daughters. So, Dad, Jen, are you guys ready? Rapid fire.
Absolutely.
No, I'm joking.
We are on fire. We're ready.
We're fired up. We are fired up. So,
Yes, we
so a lot of these questions they go from what's it like in business with family and generational things and whatnot. So I'm just going to start off with the first question here, um, and that is Jennifer. Are there any things in from business that you have learned from Dad? And Dad, are there any things that you've learned from Jennifer about business? So Jennifer, we'll start with you. What are the things that you've gained insight in from Dad when it comes to business?
Well, that's a loaded question. How much time do we have, Janet?
Yeah, you
I
have
mean,
2 minutes to answer. Go.
2 minutes. No one wants to hear me talk for 2 minutes. Um, Everything really. But I think when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind is like growing up with Dad. You know, Dad as our dad. I always felt encouraged to be an entrepreneur, but not necessarily forced into doing it, if that makes sense. So, when I was younger, fun fact, I was a dancer growing up, and that was probably the first thing I was really passionate about. And, dad would drive me to my dance classes every Saturday morning. And, I would talk about how I wanted to own a dance studio, and we would just have those. And again, I'm a teenager, right? So dreaming big here. Um, but we would have those conversations, and dad would kind of challenge me on like, what would that look like? What would that feel like? What do you think you would have to do? And, just encourage me to stay plugged in. So obviously life changed and I went in a different direction to be a hairdresser. So when that came up again, it was almost like deja vu. Like I was having flashbacks of those Saturday morning drives to the dance studio of like, all right, well, what do how are you going to do this? How are you going to figure it out? What do you need to do? Um, and so I think I was 26 years old when I opened my business and didn't have a clue. So I think one of the um, benefits in my life is having dad as my dad, number one, but also having a dad that loves entrepreneurship. Doesn't really matter what you do, he just has a passion for entrepreneurship. So, I think he was just so eager to help me. And I think probably the biggest takeaway for me was that I had zero confidence when it came to business when I first started. And so just talking to dad, asking him questions, asking advice, grew that confidence over time where, you know, then I kind of felt like I didn't need to lean on him as much. And I think that that's a testimony for how much dad has poured into me as an entrepreneur. Like you would think as a mentor, that's a compliment. Like she doesn't need me that much anymore. Um, I remember being very emotional, um, which we know you can't be emotional in business. And then just not being really confident in decision making. And I think that's really where dad kind of helped me understand decision making, understand how to think through problems, and just do the best that you can. So listen, I could sit here and tell you all the stories of everything he's ever helped me with, but I think the biggest thing is that he has always encouraged us to be entrepreneurs if that's what we wanted to be and be supportive not only as a dad, but as a mentor in business as well. And hopefully, my biggest goal is that someday, if my kids decide, have those same questions, that I can channel dad in that way. I think obviously it's been a lot about entrepreneurship, but hopefully when the time comes as a parent, I will be able to talk to my kids about the decisions of career paths and be supportive the way that dad's been supportive of us.
Yeah, I would
So,
agree with you, Jen. You gotta come to dad with a plan.
oh,
Because what's going to happen next is going to be a lot of questions, and I think that I think inadvertently, to your point, whether it was as a child, a young adult, I'm not that I'm an old adult now, but as a full grown adult now, the ability to what are the questions dad would ask, and those are the things you almost have to start asking yourself. Okay, let's like thinking things through, and also not trying not to be emotional about things and not making a decision based from an emotional state, which early on in my career, I was all emotion, all passion, and all emotion, and would get really flustered when I didn't understand something. And it just never really ended that great for me when I went that route. But yeah, really good points, Jen. So Dad, what do you think, what kind of entrepreneurial insights have you gained from Jennifer or myself or Joel or Emily?
Well, I just have another child, Natalie, who's entering into the real estate business. So she's got the entrepreneur bug too, it seems. So I'm thankful for that. But, um, you know, first of all, with Jennifer, it, she, I go back and I remember vividly those conversations around opening a dance studio. And then when she got into the hair business, she had quickly moved to, having her own salon someday. And so I think the first thing I learned is that, when she absorbed, she was a listener. She, wasn't like, when I would talk about things, I didn't get eye rolls. I got, somebody who was soaking in the things that I was saying, not that everything that I shared with her maybe that she embraced or implemented, but she absorbed it. She listened. And so, I think that's critical, for someone who is pursuing entrepreneurship, working with a mentor, working with a coach, is that, you have to be eager to learn, and eager to listen. And Jennifer was very good at that. So, uh, with a whole host of other things, but really, what I've learned from Jennifer is just not just the need for change, and embracing change, but really seeking change, seeking it out. Sometimes, we get, especially in today's world, we're dealing with change all the time because it's just coming at us. Things are just changing all the time. So, we can be in a position to react and always be reacting to change, where Jennifer is more of, okay, here's where I'm at right now. This is moving in the right direction. This is not. So, what needs to change? And then having the courage, to do that, because change takes courage, especially if you're looking to change significantly away from the norms and the models that your particular industry has out there, and so, being an innovator, being open to, trying things that nobody else has yet embraced, being out in front of that, being an early adapter, that, again, those early adapters takes a special um, mindset, a special personality, but typically it's those folks that are going to be the early bird that gets the worm, and really gets ahead of the curve when it comes to innovation. So, so for me, yeah, I mean, I think I had some of that, looking out and and maybe some of that, got transferred to Jennifer. But, I even see her do things that I probably would have had a hard time tackling, from a standpoint of that level of change, and kind of just, you know, kind of going a completely different direction within the same industry. So, you know, so just she's very inspirational. Let me put it that way with how she approaches business. So, and so then I think with you, Stacy, again, just then your ability to create that work-life balance in your life, that I haven't been particularly good at. I can kind of, and I still am. I struggle with that. It's I'm just kind of like always all in. Even when I'm not in or should be in. My mind's still there, and it's still churning. So so just being able to say, okay, because you carry, your roles, and Jennifer has this too, being a mom, but, certainly those roles really do require, that a management skill in life that, that I probably don't possess, and haven't really developed too well. So,
Well, I think thank you, Dad. I appreciate that. I wish that I could delegate the way that Dad does. Because what appears to be my work-life balance is me having like multiple tabs open in my brain of, okay, kids school and got this, and I got work and I got to do this. I got a meeting at 5:30 and oh my gosh, it's more, it's just like where I wish Dad is a master delegator. And I'll share a what we think is a funny story. Years ago, we were all getting ready to go to dinner. We were at Dad's house, and I think we were waiting on Joel. And Dad goes and looks at his phone, and he's like, "Hey, Emily, why don't you call your brother, see where he's at?" And Emily's like, "Why don't you call him? You just picked your phone up." He's like, "I'm delegating." I'm like, like master delegator. So things we can still learn. Always learning and progressing. So being a master delegator certainly is something to be learned. So another question that we received in was, how do you think that different generations approach business or innovation or risk taking?
Well, let's break that apart a little bit. Let's start with
Yeah.
business. And again, I can only speak from my life and my experience, but I'll give you guys this example. Growing up in the industry, in the beauty industry, it's something that we call the hustle culture. Have you heard this before?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think necessarily I learned it just from the industry. I think Dad kind of instilled that in us as well, growing up. And so starting out new, in my business, it's kind of like you're working all the nights, you're working weekends, you're working, 10-hour days if you're a yes person. And so I think sometimes I struggle with relating to the next generation of hairdressers that are coming out of beauty school, because that's how I did it. And so when I can tell kind of when I'm talking to someone that's new, that's say 20 years old, and they're like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Right. So then you start to hear like, I don't want to work at night. I don't want to work on the weekends. I don't want to have a hustle culture. I want to build a career around my life. And so that just wasn't how I did it. That's not what I was taught growing up. So in embracing change, I have thought about that. And, now it's kind of something that I talk about a lot, even though I don't necessarily practice what I preach, because again, we're still Dad's children. So I still have a hard time not working so much. But the question then comes as the business owner to say, okay, how can I provide a career that gives them the life that they want? And so if someone's telling me I don't want to work at night, okay, so then what's the answer, right? And so then we're coming up with solutions. So I have an answer. Like I'm brand new. I have 0 clients, but I don't want to work at nighttime. All right. Well, then you need what clients are going to come in from 10 to 3 every day, and then you go after those clients. And it's not. And I think I said this multiple times. Me early on, it's like I would do anything. I'll braid your cat's tail. What do you want me to do? As long as I'm doing hair, I'm happy, right? And so now it's like, well, I don't want to cut hair. I just want to focus on hair coloring. So again, more challenging, but there is a solution. So instead of me saying, well, I don't believe in that. You need to have this hustle culture. You have to work at night. You have to work on Saturdays. It's like, I'm not winning with this generation saying those things or even running a business like that. So how are we finding a compromise, and how are we finding a solution to that? Because that's just not how people want to work. And then we're looking at the clientele, right? When I was growing up new in the industry, it's like everybody worked a 9 to 5. So you worked at nighttime because that's when clients could come in. COVID hit, everything has changed. I got clients in here, got hair color on their head and they're typing on their laptop. We made a bar, right, for our clients to sit at to process their hair and their work. And they got 2 laptops, a notebook, their water, a snack. They're working from home, but they're working from the salon. So, things have changed in the last 17 years that I've been doing hair. And there's no way that I can continue to move in the direction that I thought was the quote unquote right way. It's understanding your customer, your clients that are coming in, and then the people that you have working inside of your business. What do they want? What do they need? How do they want to work? Because we know if we have happy employees, then we have more longevity. So it's not, I can remember we had this rule, like you have to work on Saturdays. It's not an option. Well, that's not a thing in my business anymore. You don't have to work on Saturdays if you don't want to. So business wise in my world has changed so much. And I believe that if I still had that hustle culture for other people, then we wouldn't be in business. But you can't say I can't have hustle culture, because
Yeah.
that's just who raised me. Okay, we're working hard and we're washing our cars on the weekend, guys. Okay, you ain't nothing if you're not washing your car, and there's a way to wash it too. Okay, don't go out of order. Do not. And now I got my daughter scrub a dub-dubbing just like Dad did, right?
The little vinegar diluted for the windshields. And anyway, that's a whole nother podcast on how to properly wash your car. So,
Yes.
But Jennifer, you made a great point about, looking at things, generationally, like the first observing that that's not how I did it. Right. And saying, okay, even though that's not how I did it, what's the compromise? And I think a lot of people, a lot of business owners can miss that because they're looking for people that are willing to do it the way they did it, even if they did it, even if they started 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, just it, in the time that your business has been open, you made great examples in what you just said of how different things are now. So that's a great point, Jennifer. Really good. Deb, how do you feel different generations are approaching business now?
Well, yeah, there's no doubt it's changed. I mean, and the biggest, I think, catalyst to that change has just simply been technology. I mean, I go starting our business, I mean, technology was just not a thing other than, phones and, answering machines and, those kind of things. I mean, there was no computers, no computer at anybody's desk. There was no fax machines, all that stuff was just really in its beginning stages. So, and so I think, and now, really with, technology being even to this point, where it's so powerful and so easy, it just has changed the dynamics of, of work. So I think, that probably nobody would argue with that, but,
Yeah.
but coming at it from the perspective of knowing what business was like pre-technology versus technology now, and what we can do with it. We've had episodes on AI, and we're learning more about that. I mean, that's phenomenal. But just the speed of everything. But by the same token, I mean, I think that we talked earlier about unplugging. Much more difficult for people like me, now to, unplug. Because I think back thinking, all right, I remember when I didn't have technology. So when, you went home, you went home, when you went on vacation, you went on vacation because
Yeah.
there was nothing other than, picking up the phone and checking in, there was nothing beeping. There was nothing coming at you. Your curiosity waited, till you got back to the office, after your time off, to see what happened or what's going on. So, usually came back to a stack of phone messages, to call people back. And, but now, you're plugged in all the time. So, there's an efficiency to that, and people's expectations are around that. But, it does, impact us, I think, from the inability to unplug, from things, because we're just so, especially someone like me, well, let me jump on, at 9 o'clock at night and see if I got the answer to that email,
Yep.
that I haven't been able to look at since 3 o'clock, rather than just saying, whether I got the email or not, nothing's happening until tomorrow. So just, just chill. But, so, but where I think people who have grown up with that, or kind of born into that, because now we're getting, the workforce is, people who are kind of born into technology, born into, the iPhones and things of that nature. They can approach things differently. They can still seem to, in some cases, balance all that out. And I think the older generation can struggle. But with that said, I have to be careful that I don't have expectations of people too that, are, maybe more than what they should be because of, how I approach things, in terms of response times and things. It's definitely, interesting, challenging, exciting, to
Yeah.
be in business, with all that's happening. That's for sure. And I feel very fortunate, that I've kind of been able to be on both sides of it now. So still yet to determine which side I like best, but, you know, but it's definitely exciting. So,
Yeah. Well,
sure.
and there's something that comes to mind when, think about just how generations approach things. And, I think every generation, um, needs the ability to adapt and then, and have a willingness to at least try to change with, or at least embrace the changes that are coming. And, I know now several years ago, there was a very successful agent in our agency. I think he had probably been an agent for 30 or 35 years, did very, very well for himself. And, he was part of the generation where everything was done on paper. So you take an application, it was on paper, where our company was introducing like, hey, you're going to be able to do this on your laptop. You're not going to have to submit, everything's going to be electronic. And I remember we were in one of our big meetings, and he goes to another agent. He goes, I am absolutely not going to do that. That is ridiculous. And he was genuinely upset. He was like, I'm not doing that. That is so impersonal. And that sticks out to me because, again, here's, Dad, I know you kind of grew up, came up in the business with him, but his inability to even embrace that change, he was out of business within 2 years.
Mhm.
Like it was just, and so now so that just sticks out to me that regardless of what generation you're in, needing to have that ability to at least embrace what's coming at you, or like be like Jennifer, like let me seek out what maybe is coming next, what could be better, what could fit my life better. I think is really important. So let me ask you guys this: what one of the other questions that we had was, how do you think different generations, and I particularly like this one, how do you feel different generations approach risk taking? And I know risk taking can maybe be a big umbrella of what that could look like. And I know we've shared before on podcasts where, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, something that might cost you, say, a risk, and as far as in a monetary way, something could cost you $250,000 to kind of get up and running, where now might not
25
even be
minutes.
a, yeah, I was gonna say, but it may be not even that much, depending on how you do it. But just risk taking overall. I mean, how do you guys feel, different generations are embracing or taking or looking at risk taking now?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that risk taking has become um, a bigger sense of urgency and a topic. And like you said, Stace, it's not, before it was like you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And I think different degrees of risk taking, it just isn't that anymore. I know for myself, when I tend to take a big risk, it's always, we've talked about this before, where you're like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And of course, even with all the risk taking I've taken in 9 years, it was never anything that was going to put me out of business, right? Um, I always had that mindset of like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll just go back, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I can humble myself and say, hey, I thought this was going to work and it didn't, and I failed, and we're going to go back to how it used to be here. Um, Thankfully, I didn't have to do that, guys. I'm a Leo, okay? That would hurt me to do. That would hurt me to do. But yeah, I mean, and when you're asked, I'm thinking about the conversations I have behind the chair, and it's like, hey, I want to start a dip business, like again, chips and dip
Yeah.
business, out of my kitchen, and then next time I see them 6 weeks later, it's launched. Or I want to invest in real estate, and the next thing I know, they bought a rental property. Like it's I think just I think what it is with risk taking is that in 2025, people are not looking for that traditional 9 to 5 work life. And so the risk taking really comes from, how can I go after something that I really want? How can I have more freedom? And with really little, a risk, but not a risk that's necessarily going to risk at all. And so I think that that's what's exciting in 2025, is that there's just so many opportunities for risk taking, where maybe, 20, 30 years ago, it was, this risk is going to cost me $500,000, and people just didn't have the financials to be able to take risks in that way. So I think the younger generation are going to teach us all how to really risk take here soon.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the big factor again is technology, and just the pace of change. Many young people have seen their parents who have been in those 9 to 5 jobs being displaced. For example, maybe a parent working in a job for 10 years, climbing the corporate ladder, only to find that company get bought out or get sold or change, and now they're out, and they got a severance package, and now they got to go find something else. And in some cases, that could be, they could have seen their parents do that 2 to 3 times,
Yeah.
which might involve then moving and So they're seeing a lot of that, and I think they all realize and anticipate that with technology, that could even be something that's even going to accelerate. And so you can look at entrepreneurship like, a dip business, or, even something small, to say, hey, I can, I'm in control to some extent. I'm in control of my own destiny. And and that's what I've said now, probably, especially since we started this podcast, and maybe even before that, entrepreneurship, which seems risky, is probably one of the safest ways to go, because you're not putting your destiny in somebody else's hands. And so you might get out of college and have a degree, and you want to go work, and you get into the corporate world, and but you just realize there's just so much uncertainty in all that. So and then the challenge is you start to build your life around working for someone else, only to find yourself continually caught up in this displacement. So I think that younger people are certainly going to be much more willing, because the cost of risk has reduced, as we've just described. And so there's ways that you can start businesses. I mean, we see people making money just through social media, selling products, for social, through social media, and building revenue streams that way. I mean, there's just so, and again, I don't understand all that completely, but it doesn't look like there's a massive investment, that you have to make to do that. You can plug into social media, which is relatively inexpensive, so it's not like you're going out there and having to go $1 million in debt or $500,000 in debt, to pull that off. So I think risk taking is going to probably become more and more the norm, especially for younger people, than what we've ever seen before, which is exciting. So that's why we do this podcast. It's for that group that we're built for.
Yeah. And I would agree with you, Jennifer. I think this next generation, AKA dad's grandkids, are going to have us all. We're going to have horse farms, education. Bishop's apparently building rock climbing walls, mobile rock climbing walls. That was his idea to me the other night. Showed up to a party, harness. I said, how do you even know what a harness is, sir? Okay. You're a child. But anyway, so one last question, which we have several more, so maybe we'll have to do a part 2 on this. But another question that we got in was, and again, we could probably go on and on about this too. What are the challenges and advantages that come with working in a family business? So let's start. You know what? I'll go first. How about that?
Perfect.
Challenges, Jennifer. Challenges and advantages. Well, I could tell. I don't know if they're necessarily challenges, but I think the observation of being in a family business now that I have for over 20 years is that sometimes there's no clear start and end, you're around your family, but you're kind of almost working independently, but then also working together in some capacities. You're maybe sharing clients and sharing space, and you're talking and you're around each other, but you're not necessarily maybe bonding. You're not necessarily having like quality time and talking about your family or the family, or what's going on with some, like what's happening outside of work and business. And so, sometimes that can be, like, wow, we talk about all these things, but there's really there's not enough time to talk about these other things, or feel like we're not connecting on, as, sisters or brothers, or, or whatever it is. But so I think just, what we've learned is trying, just being intentional about having some separation, as far as, even if it's still in the same space, but just talking about different things and having time where it's like, okay, it's not all work. Trust me, work has to get done, but it's, just trying to be more intentional about those things. But certainly the advantages, in my opinion, far outweigh any challenges or disadvantages because, like any other family, there's times when some are maybe experiencing something that's a little harder than the rest. And, you have people that kind of pick up your slack in a way or pick up things that, you're just not able to keep on your plate. And, and the ship has to, like the ship has to keep sailing. We got to keep moving forward because it's not just our family that's dependent. There's other people that are depending on us. So having people that, will kind of help you pick up your slack, not make you feel bad about it. And just, and that you just know like, all right, my ship is not going to sink because I can't handle or do or be 150% when it comes to work. So I will also add, just because I've worked with clients for so long, I think it definitely helps, probably, a requirement that all the family members like what they're doing. Because I have seen families where, maybe one person, one sibling, one child is in the business, but they just don't want to be in the business. And so that's probably a whole different story, but that's certainly not our story. So thankfully we all like what we're doing. And even though Jennifer's not here at Dempsey Weiss, we're all in it together anyway. So, I think early on I was joking. I was like, I don't think I can cut hair, but I can sweep hair up if I have to. I can check people out. I can be the greeter. I can be the Walmart greeter. So Jen, we'll throw it to you and then we'll have Dad wrap us up here. What challenges or advantages being in a family-owned business?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am like the outcast in our little sibling group here because obviously all three of them work together. But I am the one that like gets the phone calls like, "Hey, Stacy's making me mad because this happened," and so I'm kind of like the mediator. They loop me in on what's happening, and we definitely keep each other grounded and in check in that way. But I mean, me and my siblings are already so close that I do feel like entrepreneurship has brought us even closer. I think we can relate on a deeper level. And I know I've shared this before, but even something really silly is like around tax time, we're all calling each other like, "You owe any money? How much money? Are we okay? Is everybody all right?" So I think that we can just really relate to each other, even when it just comes to the challenges of a business, whether it's employees or feeling overwhelmed. Trying to manage home life and dealing with our kids. And I think because we all are entrepreneurs, it's really easy for like Stacy to understand like, hey, I can't make the soccer game. And she's the first one to like, okay, I'll pick up Eva. And we just really understand each other and we're there for each other. Of course, like any family, we have our problems, we have our issues. But I think we're good at just trying to remain grateful for where we are and what we have. We kind of tell each other that like at the end of the day, these are small problems. None of these are big problems. And so we can just be there for each other kind of on that family level and the business level for sure. Like I have my daughter's birthday party and them three are in the corner like talking about insurance and I'm rolling my eyes like, there's no insurance right now, guys. I don't know what you're talking about, but no one cares, right? So there's always a little bit of that at family gatherings. Like, did you call that client back? And I'm just on the outsides like, ooh, all right, wrap that conversation up. But,
Yes, Jennifer, we were not doing a good job of turning things off, okay, and segmenting time out.
I'm telling you, we're dad's children. We have flaws. Do you think this is by accident? So yeah, so I will agree. I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons when it comes to having family businesses and kind of just being all together. And, one thing that I like to think about is I hope that, or I know that our kids are watching. And so that really makes me hopeful that, they're seeing what is going on. They're seeing how it all works. And I was laughing because yesterday, my daughter's like, so when I get older, I'm going to work in an office like Gigi, which is our sister Emily, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'm going to do hair at your salon. Maybe I'll see you there, mommy. So I know they're absorbing, and it's I just think for me, it's the right role model for our kids to see. So I definitely think the challenges don't necessarily matter. Those are what makes us better as a family. So
Love it. All right, Dad.
So,
Hit the road run.
We'll wrap it up quick. I mean, there's everything you guys said. I mean, there's just a lot of blessing and benefits in there. Certainly, Jennifer and I are different. Being partners in a business, we're not dealing with the day to day. We're kind of dealing now with more the higher level type of discussions, on an occasional basis. So, but where Stacy and Joel and Emily, we're more into the day to day, and a little different there. But I think the biggest challenge for me is when when to wear the dad hat and when to wear kind of that business hat, and I'm not always real good at that, so that can be challenging because you factor that into things. When things outside of work are going on, my mind is, all right, yes, I want to be there for my son, my daughter, whatever the situation may be. But I'm also thinking, okay, how is this potentially going to impact work or the business, or, so, just trying to, and for me is just to say, okay, I'm dad first. That's what I want to be, and then the business, we'll figure that out. But that needs to be at least, in your guys' eyes, I want that to be, not the first thing that's coming out of me, so, and, so it's, it can be challenging for that, but, and then, like you said, family stuff. I mean, we just want to always be careful, that we don't get off into our own little world, even when it comes to, downtime and being together. So, but again, communication, talking, making sure that, if there is challenges, we just have to talk about it. That's the key. We got to talk about it because, we just you can't let things just happen and fester when it comes to, hey, this happened on the personal side, the family side, and we haven't resolved something for whatever it may be, and now it's carrying into, how we work together. So it can be challenging, but it's definitely worth it, when everybody's, loves what they do and is all in. So
I will say, for whatever reason, somehow we figured out to still show up and put on a good face, and the clients, I can't think of a time the clients ever felt like, oh God, Joel and Stacy they were just, cussing each other out in the car before they got here. I feel like we all can show up really well. And, when it comes to when it's time to work, and put the client first and what they need and what we need to do, and put that in the forefront and make sure that, nobody really feels that or sees that. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's like, what? My little brother, who's bigger and taller than me, might tick me off, but I know in about a week or less, it's going to be fine. And we'll be back to shucking and jiving like we normally do. So anyway, to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please feel welcome to continue to send us more questions. Perhaps we'll do a part 2. But until we see each other again, everybody be safe, and we will see you guys in our next episode. Bye-bye.